Dominus illuminatio mea. You'll see it everywhere in Oxford, on the windows and all over the place, as the ancient emblem of that medieval university. The Lord is my light. Experts think that the liturgy of this day go back right to the difficult times of the early church. If one analyzes the references, both in the sacred texts that are sung and in the readings themselves, especially the first, the collect too, one sees that there is a cry from the depths for help in a time of persecution, and the experts think that it comes straight from the catacombs. They're down in the dark, hoping for light. Remember, catacombs were very dark, and only there were they safe, and only there could they pray in safety, for the Romans at least respected the dead and the place of their last repose. The Gospel is chosen towards the beginning of the cycle of readings in the year as the origin of the call. There are several things going on in this Gospel. I would like to zoom today just into one, for one cannot leave but one message, otherwise one becomes too saturated with thought. Where did the Lord place himself to teach the very large crowd? Well, he formed the first pulpit of history. Only a little way from the throng could he be seen by all, and the form of the pulpit comes from this. Classically, pulpits were constructed reflecting the end of a boat. Look around at the old pulpits in ancient cathedrals and you'll see what I mean. The word heard. It has to be heard. We can imagine the attention of this great throng. They would not let fall one word. They were hungry for the word. In past-gone generations, in seminaries, especially on the continent, where they had these very large churches, the candidates for ordination were trained in how to communicate, how also physically to communicate the voice. They had no microphones, but the ancient pulpits were constructed in such a way that there was an inbuilt amplification system. Look carefully in the old pulpits, on the continent especially, they're still there, and you will see on top of the pulpit there is a piece which is called in French la bavois, the voice breaker, which acts as a megaphone, so that the voice is not dispersed all over the place, but is projected out to the back of the church. Also, the pulpit was placed in the middle of the nave and not at the end. And I'm told that the people, because they had these mobile chairs, would turn from all sides to face the pulpit. And there was great attention given also for this simple reason, that there was not an awful lot going on in medieval society. When the preacher came to town, it was an event. And we know what that meant and the effect that that could have. I make a jump. We, in our day, are competing with the experts at communication. We, in our day, are competing also with people who are profoundly damaged precisely by too much communication. They are easily bored and their concentration is low. This means that to have anything similar to the effect that the preachers had in days of old, they have to be fully aware of what they're competing against. Now, there can be a temptation to use the cheap ways of drawing attention, borrowed precisely from the profane. It has the value that it has. But I want to propose another model to you. It's that of what has always worked in the gift of communication, and which for the same reasons will still work, without in any way having to play to the gallery. In the Catholic world, the communication of the word will take on something of the timbre, the culture in which it is inserted. Go to somewhere like Oxford and see how it's done there, and you will see how John Henry Newman, in his days as Vicar of St. Mary's, the university place of preaching and influence in the heart of Oxford, was able to have a massive effect and to draw huge crowds without any means whatsoever but the power of the calm, clear truth, which we can still hear on the page, for actually he wrote also what he was preaching. It is doubtful, however, whether in our day that would be sufficient. Probably, if we were around today, he would engage more physically and more visually with his congregation, knowing that what he is now up against would demand different techniques. Now, I want to make a little jump and a parenthesis, and you'll see why at the end. When growing up in teenage years, I was very blessed to land, when I was becoming a Catholic, in a very good church. It was run by 6 and sometimes 7 monks, Benedictines, and it was a pleasure to hear them preach. Each had his different style. I don't think a single one wrote them down. They communicated from their heart, and one remembered quite a lot of what they said. It had, however, a profound effect for this extra reason, that they had in their person a conviction. They nearly all had university degrees, usually from Oxford, where they studied, and therefore a lot of clout when it came to making some assertion. They knew what they were talking about, and it made sense, and they could put it in good English, understood by all. Eventually, something changed. In my scene, it was when they started to celebrate the Welsh Mass in the diocese on the first Sunday of Advent, 1970. And I remember there feeling, well, it's my duty to start supporting this, but I noticed straight away, here there's a huge difference. And I was torn between two. What was happening? One was coming from an ethos of doubly consecrated life, dense with prayer, starting at 20 past 5 in the morning. No, 10 past 5. Matins at 20 past. And working out in several offices throughout the day, which also came into preaching mode, but with a whole baggage behind it. In the situation then, one was facing two problems. One was facing the situation of priests who were coming simply from a seminary without a university degree, and also, without, it would seem, that same element of capacity to get the message across. And I was in pain. I was in deep pain. Why? Because I needed the word. I needed to be nourished. And it was a drama. And I was very naughty. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I was very naughty, because what I would do sometimes coming back from the Welsh Mass in the evening on a Sunday was, I would secretly go in to hear Anglican vicar I knew because he always preached well, and it was great to see someone going to a pulpit and giving all his person in a well-prepared communication of the word. And he's usually pretty true as well because it's a very high church. Now, this was strange. What was going on here? Well, it's something that I sympathize with because I've heard many, many testimonies from lay people out there that that's their pain too right now. They're not being nourished. Now, it's kind of serious stuff. There's another problem too. It's this. The big difference between that particular naughty bit that I put in and the norm that one would have quite often out there in the diocesan priesthood was this. I'm talking about not the continent, but that situation I was in. It was not the middle and the high point of the event. It was preparing for something else, which of course was greater, and that is quite correct. But the only thing was, it was not valued for what it was. And by the way, it's something which had changed only recently in the Catholic setup. Why? Because until then, over England and Wales, there had been that. It's what they used to call the evening devotions. Rosary, sermon, and benediction were all over the land until the evening mass came in and ousted it forevermore. And it's a pity, because at that point, the people got out of the habit of going explicitly for an event in the Word. Now, do you see how damaging that's going to be for the people of God? It's never been retrieved. I make a last jump. It's what happened partly in consequence. At that age, because of the situation, the parents and so on, I was spending all those summer holidays on the continent, usually in Catholic lands. France, Bavaria, Austria, Italy, Portugal, Switzerland. What have most of these in common? They were hugely Catholic, and there was in the air the cultivation of the Word, and it was hugely different. I remember being very impressed as a young boy, seeing how in certain cultures it was what I was familiar with before. The whole body coming into play, communication, the whole being engaging with those before, and it was something quite moving. And I remember still many of the sermons heard in those days. What was the result? I chose to go to the continent afterwards, and it was partly because of this. There were things there which I needed and I wasn't getting back home. I finished, my friends. What's it all got to do with you? It's got a lot to do with you, my friends. You need the Word. You need to be nourished. And if you're not getting it in church, you must somehow make up for it. Through reading, through going into YouTubes, through listening to CDs and DVDs which are well chosen. You cannot live the Christian life without being nourished on your level. So let's get this straight. When the Lord created the first pulpit of history, he was giving the model. He meant business, and he left a message for all time. We need to be put on fire by the living and vibrant Word of God.